Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a really fascinating journey straight into the human mind. We're going to look at exactly how our brilliantly, maybe even stubbornly egocentric brains process the world around us, how they dictate our attention, and ultimately how modern digital media has figured out how to perfectly hack those exact biological systems. So if you've ever felt like the center of the universe, for better or worse, you're absolutely going to want to stick around for this one.
Okay, we have all been there, right? You trip on a completely flat sidewalk, or maybe you spill half your coffee right down your shirt just minutes before a huge meeting. Instantly, your stomach just drops. You totally freeze, and this panicked question immediately echoes in your head. Oh my gosh, did everyone just see me do that? We instantly assume the entire world just stopped what they were doing to witness our minor, slightly embarrassing fumble. But, as we'll see, our brains are actually playing a massive trick on us here.
Here is our quick roadmap for today's explainer. First, the spotlight effect. Then, why social pain lingers. Next, how emotion shapes memory. And finally, hacking the brain's attention.
All right, let's jump right into section 1, the spotlight effect.
So the term spotlight effect was coined by psychologists Thomas Galovich, Victoria Husted-Medvec, and Kenneth Savitsky. Basically, it describes this totally wild phenomenon where we drastically overestimate how much other people actually notice our actions or our appearance. You see, because you are the center of your own world, your brain just naturally defaults to the assumption that you're the center of everyone else's world too. The real takeaway here is that we take our own intense internal anxiety, we use it as an anchor, and then we falsely project it outward onto onlookers. Onlookers who, honestly, are probably just thinking about themselves. To show you just how powerful this internal projection can be, you have to hear about this famous 1980 study by Kleck and Strenta. It's fascinating. So, researchers applied a fake, super prominent makeup scar to the faces of participants and let them look at it in a mirror. Then, the researcher was like, okay, let me just apply a little moisturizer to the scar to keep it from cracking, but secretly, they wiped the scar completely off. The participants, completely convinced they still had a massive scar on their face, were sent in to have a conversation with a total stranger. And afterward, they reported that the stranger was tense, patronizing, and constantly staring at their scar. They perceived completely fabricated social reactions, all because their own self-consciousness literally dictated their reality. Crazy, right?
And that intense hyper-awareness leads us perfectly into section 2, why social pain lingers.
The author Alexander Dumas actually hit the nail on the head in The Count of Monte Cristo. He wrote that moral wounds, which is what we'd call social pain today, things like rejection or betrayal, are always painful, always ready to bleed when touched. And think about it. If you try to remember a time you say broke your arm, you remember the facts of what happened, sure, but you don't actually feel the physical throbbing pain again. But if you recall a terrible breakup or a really humiliating social rejection from 5 years ago, your stomach drops, your chest tightens. You can literally relive that exact social agony on demand.
And the neuroscience behind this is absolutely incredible. When participants were put into an fMRI scanner, researchers found that reliving physical pain recruits areas of the brain that handle bodily states, like the IFG pathway. So it recalls the sensory data, but it doesn't make you actually hurt in the moment. But reliving social pain? That engages the DMPFC pathway in the prefrontal cortex, which handles mental states and directly triggers your brain's active pain system. You are quite literally re-triggering emotional suffering. So that brings us right to section 3, how emotion shapes memory. Emotion basically hijacks your memory across 3 specific stages: encoding, storage, and retrieval. First up, emotional arousal lights up your amygdala, which strictly narrows your focus during the encoding phase. Then, during storage, that exact same arousal basically cements the memory into a permanent vault in your brain. And finally, during retrieval, your current emotional mood actually dictates which pieces of the memory puzzle you can access. A really stark example of how emotion completely alters that first encoding stage is what's known as the weapon focus effect. This comes from cue utilization theory, which basically says that high emotional arousal causes a super strict narrowing of our attention. So if a person witnesses a crime, their highly aroused brain will focus entirely on the central threat, the weapon. They'll encode the knife or the gun in vivid, high-definition detail, but completely sacrifice the peripheral stuff, like the perpetrator's clothing or the color of their getaway car. Our brain willingly trades the big picture just to aggressively prioritize the absolute most emotionally stimulating data.
All right, let's fast forward to the digital era for section 4, hacking the brain's attention.
In the wild world of short-form video, think TikTok, Instagram Reels, all of that,
creators have a literal magic number. 3. You have exactly 3 seconds to bypass someone's biological instinct to just keep scrolling. Media psychology research tells us that human attention spans on these apps now average a whopping 2 to 3 seconds. To beat that, creators actually reverse engineer our brain's attention bias. Remember the weapon focus effect we just talked about, how our brains are hardwired to prioritize sudden threats or sudden changes? Well, short-form videos totally exploit this by packing the first 3 seconds with sudden motion, super sharp contrast, jarring jump cuts, and extreme novelty. But hey, once they actually manage to stop your thumb from scrolling, they have to keep you watching, right? And how do they do that? By triggering the exact same affective emotional pathways we've been discussing this whole time. Creators use curiosity daps, making it literally physically uncomfortable not to know what happens next. They trigger FOMO, the fear of missing out, which taps right into that very real social pain of being excluded. They use surprise, and they lean heavily into relatability by presenting these incredibly specific, everyday situations that make you go, wait, I thought I was the only one who did that. They trigger that mental state processing pathway. It creates an instant, deeply ingrained emotional resonance. And listen, this isn't some happy accident. It's a highly calculated science. Creators use a very specific playbook to perfectly map to your psychology. They kick off with a hook to completely shatter your expectations. Then they quickly follow up with a problem statement that usually taps right into your daily anxieties. From there, they give you some quick value, purposefully hold back the payoff to resolve that burning curiosity gap, and finally hit you with a call to action. They are systematically spoon-feeding your brain exactly what it wants: emotional arousal, closure, and social connection. Which really leaves us with one incredibly important, maybe even a little unsettling question to ponder today. Who is actually in control of your attention? Is it our ancient biology constantly keeping us hyper-focused on social standing, potential threats, and emotional arousal? Or is it the perfectly optimized algorithms that have literally learned to play our neural pathways like a grand piano? So next time you find yourself an hour deep into a short-form video rabbit hole or, agonizing over a completely tiny social misstep, just remember the incredibly powerful wiring of your own main character brain. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep questioning what's pulling your focus out there.